What we're specifically talking about today here is the Journalism Fund's European Local Cross-Border Grant Program. And the purpose here is to really foster cross-border investigation that has like a localized angle and approach. So here's a little outline of the session. Um, First of all, I will be talking about the PluPro program, which I'll describe more in a minute, and specifically the local cross-border grant program that is a part of larger PluPro project that we have going here at Journalism Fund in collaboration with Transitions Online, a publication in Eastern Europe that also provides training to media organizations in Eastern Europe. We'll talk about why the local focus is important and what do we exactly mean by local. Um, and then we'll talk a little bit about one element and potential approach that you could use totally optionally in your application to focus on solutions journalism. So I'll describe to you a little bit what solutions journalism entails. And then we'll talk about what makes a cross-border investigation successful. And then lastly, we'll review some of the support structures that we've put in place to ensure that this grant program is valuable to you, to build your capacity, to develop your skills, to connect you to other journalists. And we'll go into some details about what's eligible, what makes a strong application, what will make it stand out in terms of the assessment criteria that we look at, and provide you with a bit of technical guidance for how to do this work. The PluPro program is a program that started in 2024. Again, it's a collaboration between Journalism Fund Europe and Transitions Online, which I just described earlier. PluPro stands for Pluralism Pro Demus, which is Latin for we want to promote pluralism. This project is funded by the European Commission, which provides 90% of the funding for this project. There's also support from a couple of other organizations, the Limelight Foundation and Vereniging Veronica. And the PluPro umbrella project supports 3 different strands, sub-projects. The European Cross-Border Grant Program is one part, and then there's another part that we'll be talking specifically about today. It's the local Cross-Border Grant Program. There's also another program called Microgrants for Small Newsrooms that provides a combination of funding and mentoring to help media organizations in Europe and a few countries outside to receive support for innovation, prototyping and testing of new products and services. These programs provide some mentoring and scholarship money also, which I'll go into describe a little bit later on. So I just want to create a bit of a distinction between the European Cross-Border Grant Program and the local cross-border grant program. The first one is destined for cross-border teams of professional journalists and news outlets who pursue cross-border investigative reporting on issues that are national in scope and that are occurring across borders within Europe. The local cross-border grants support also investigative journalism, also cross-border, but these must have a localized focus. It's an essential component for your application, for the focus of your work. And the idea is to focus on localized issues or responses to problems that exist across European countries and sometimes beyond as well. So again, just to reiterate, this program is destined to teams of reporters or freelance journalists who want to collaborate. They should be from different countries, at least 2 different countries. It could be more if you want to create a larger collaborative and if the issue that you're planning on investigating spans across multiple states. The precondition to being eligible for this program is that at least one of the applicants is based in the EU. The purpose of this project is to strengthen local media ecosystems. So we strongly encourage local media organizations to come forward and present applications. And the idea is to help them build capacity to pursue place-based stories and investigative work, specifically knowing that local media is increasingly struggling, that we're seeing an increasing collapse in the number of local media outlets, or at least of their resources and therefore capacity to do hard-hitting journalism. So we want to encourage and support that. And so the idea is to elevate the kind of transnational nature of localized issue and do so European at the very least, and then sometimes perhaps a bit more internationally, a scope that is a bit larger than Europe sometimes as well. So in terms of the projects that you can apply for, we accept all sorts of subjects and topics to be covered and to come and to be submitted as part of this application, as part of this program. The idea is that they need to focus on providing solid answers to the assessment criteria that are laid out on the website. And one of the main criteria that we ask you to keep a note of is that 80% of the requested budget should go to journalists and media organizations who come from EU countries, which means that only 20% of the budget can go to non-EU individuals or media outlets that are based outside of the EU. Just a bit of background on this work. So since the start of this program in 2024, there were already 21 projects that were granted out of 40 applications in the past 4 rounds. 287,000 euros have already been granted and distributed, or will be distributed shortly. And that represents 62 grantees. So as you can see, there's roughly 3 grantees per project that are supported by this work in general, or on average. So there is quite a bit of money left in the pot to support this work moving forward. This project will carry on into 2025. And the European Local Cross-Border Program in particular still has 365,000 euros to distribute in that year. And specifically, we've earmarked 250,000 for the next round. So as you can see, for just the next round alone, there's almost the same amount of money available than was distributed in the previous 4 rounds. So that's something to keep in mind. It means that there is quite a little bit of money to apply for. And there will be 2 opportunities to access that money. And that's over the course of 2 application rounds in 2025. The first one has a deadline on January the 23rd. And the second one will come a few months later on the 27th of March. So we invite you to apply and to prepare your proposals to submit and to apply for this work. And as you prepare, and think about what could you put forward in terms of ideas for investigations, I just wanted to spend a bit of time defining what we meant by local. This is like the crucial element that we need to define here in order to make you eligible when the jury reviews the proposal that you've put forward. So what we mean by local is that the investigation in and of itself should look at a topic that is, or an issue that is occurring in a geographical area that is delimited at a subnational level. In other words, for example, this could look at a cross-border region that sits and that overlaps with a border between 2 different countries, or we could focus on cities with comparable sizes, features, or issues affecting them that are not necessarily contiguous, they're not necessarily close together, but they are in different countries, and they are worthwhile being the subject of an investigation that compares how both cities operate and deal with the issues or are affected by a particular problem. We also invite you to look at regions with certain similarities. Again, it could be similarities in terms of the issues affecting them, the features that it has, the kind of size, the type of region that it is. It could be mountainous, it could be rural flatlands, agricultural areas, or it could be kind of more suburban areas. So we invite you to compare regions as well. And then there's also scope to look at how governmental organizations in different areas, in different countries are operating. And again, this will be subnational governmental organizations. We can look at companies that are operating locally in different areas. Could also be focusing on NGOs, either a singular international NGO or NGOs that do similar work that operate in different parts. We could look at communities that are operating in specific places. Those are all legitimate and good potential subjects and ways to understand what we mean by local. We also invite local media outlets to really put forward investigative ideas. As mentioned, part of the aim of this project is to reinvigorate a local media ecosystem that is struggling, and we want to build capacity to be able to produce investigative work on a local level. So any local organization that wants to collaborate with another local organization, or perhaps kind of a larger media outlet that is prepared to have a local angle and focus on a story is really welcome, and that's something that we pay particular attention to. Some of the supported projects that have come out in the past few years have looked at a range of different issues. There's been one that has looked at the kind of architecture and the energy efficiency of housing blocks that were built during the socialist era in Eastern Europe, particularly in Czech Republic and in Hungary. And this cross-border investigation looked at how, in the midst of a general energy crisis, some housing blocks were doing better than others, and notably in a peripheral district in Brno in Czech Republic. So this is a really great investigation that looked specifically at that housing issue and as it pertains to energy and who's doing better than others in dealing with this problem. There was a team of, and the first investigation was a collaboration between G7.hu and a publication called Denik Referendum based in Czech Republic. The second one here, a comparison of Antwerp, Bruges, and Rotterdam ports, is a cross-border investigation that looked at between Belgium and in the Netherlands, that looked at how these major ports in these respective countries were impacting local communities as a result of the pollution that was produced by the petrochemical industry located in these ports. And so this investigation between Apache and Follow the Money looked at just the cost that would be incurred as a result of this pollution and the public health effects that this pollution was bringing about on the local population. And then there was a story that looked at how fertilizers, notably the fertilizer called urea, produced in Belarus actually found its way into the EU through a range of shell companies that pretended that the product actually came from Uzbekistan. So this was a great investigation again that showed across various different interests playing out in Eastern Europe there to mask the actual origin of the Belarusian fertilizer, knowing the sanctions that it had been subjected to. And this is a collaboration between a couple of different media outlets, one in Belarus and one in Lithuania. Okay, I want to take a little moment to invite you to consider what you'll be asked about in the application form, which is whether the proposal that you're coming forward has a solutions journalism component. Again, this is completely optional. Your work does not need to put forward a solutions journalism angle to the story. but I thought that it would be good to take a moment to actually reflect and do the work of really thinking through what solutions journalism is, knowing that this is a direction that you could be moving into for your investigation. And just for a bit of background, I used to work for the Solutions Journalism Network, an organization that operates globally, but is based in the US. I wanted to share with you some of the basic understanding and the basic principles of solutions journalism, which you could start thinking about applying to your work. So first, the definition. Solutions journalism is defined as rigorous and evidence-based reporting on responses to social problems. So here, the key word is responses to social problems. So this is anything that affects basically people and communities. And we're talking about responses. So we're actually talking not about ideas for how to respond, but what is already being implemented, what has already been tested. And the idea of solutions journalism is that you're looking at what people are trying to do to address a problem, to address an issue. And you're doing so with the rigor of a good investigative journalism approach by really seeking out proof that of the effectiveness of the response that is being put in place. So there's some criteria, there's some principles, there's some core components and elements that you should consider, including in your story when reporting. First is that your story should focus on the response to a social problem and how that response has worked and why it hasn't. That should be the core element of the piece of reporting that you're producing. In other words, the solutions element or the response cannot be described in a couple of paragraphs at the end of a story that mostly focuses on a problem. The idea is to really investigate how people are trying to respond to it. Next up, a piece of solution journalism should look at insight. And what we mean by insight is what are the kind of lessons that makes the response that you're looking at relevant and potentially replicable by others in other contexts. So in other words, what is the kind of secret sauce that makes this response really come together and be effective? What is the lesson learned that other people should take in order to think about replicating that response? Your piece should be anchored in evidence, and there's a range of different evidence to consider here. It could be qualitative or more data-driven quantitative elements. And again, this is designed to show the effectiveness of the response, or if there's actually like no evidence that suggests that a response is worthwhile, you should feel free to point out the lack of proof of its worth. And this brings us to the crucial element that makes solutions journalism what it is, and that's the focus on limitations. In other words, you need to keep like a critical eye on anything that you're reporting on. And the idea is not to present a solution as the be all and end all in a finished product. It's always something that can be improved. And so pointing out the limitations, what hasn't worked, what needs to still be worked out is a key part of doing good solutions journalism work. And again, investigating the issue and what is being done about that issue in full. I also wanted to bring to your attention the concept of the positive deviant, which is, I think, a good starting point for any investigation that wants to become a bit more solutions focused. And what that positive deviant concept does is it invites you to analyze data by not just looking at who is doing the worst, but who is doing well, who is doing the best, actually, who is standing atop of that table with the best numbers. And the idea is that you focus on who is doing better and you try to compare who is doing better with who is doing less well, considering the resources and the characteristics that they have. So this is really useful if you want to compare two different cities or different regions that have similar characteristics and features. If one of them you're investigating because they're doing quite bad on a certain front and they're really affected by a particular issue, you might be wanting to look at, okay, who is a comparable, what is a comparable region or city or organization operating locally, and who that is doing better, and what informs that improvement, or the fact that it's doing better. So you want to identify the reasons why that is, and that is the subject of your investigation. So that's one way to think about how to apply like a solutions journalism lens to an investigation. So this is something fairly new that we're inviting people to do. And this is not to say that solutions journalism should replace investigating the problem. It's just a way to complement reporting an information ecosystem that perhaps kind of too often just focuses on the issue without trying to look at, okay, what is being put in place to address that problem. Okay, so moving on now, I want to share with you some of the tips that people who have participated in cross-border collaborations have shared in the past that has helped them make their work successful. There's many people with a ton of experience that could speak to this. And that's why we also have mentors available in this program, which I'll talk more about in a moment. But I just wanted to share some of the tips that they shared that really so stood out. So achieving success with collaboration requires that you develop and agree on a scope of work and budget together. So in partnership with the other freelance journalist or the other media outlet that you're collaborating with. If you think that you need to put that down on paper, create an MOU, so a memorandum of understanding, that just kind of lays out the basic elements, and perhaps kind of in more detail as well, for how you'll be working together during the course of your investigative project, during the course of the work that you'll be doing during the grant period, were you to receive the grant. You should be very clear on who is going to take what responsibility, who is going to do what as part of this project, and try and be really clear-eyed about who is going to do what based on an understanding of your respective skills, on the experience that you have, on the interests. That is really important to get clarity on that as well, so that not everyone is kind of confused and trying to do everything at once. Sharing the work, making sure that the best people are placed to do what they're the strongest in is essential. You also want to set up some information sharing systems. This could be, as simple as just a folder where you put your documents, where you have your master file for your investigation that you update, that is available for everyone to see. So there's transparency around the work that is being done. Set up some workflows in order to kind of facilitate your work and systematize it a little bit. Create some timelines to make sure that you keep moving the work forward in light of the deadline that you've set yourself to publish the work by the end of the grant period that you set out in your application. Set up some regular check-ins as well between the different teams, between the individuals that are participating in this work. So you make sure that you are keeping on the same wavelength, and that you're communicating quite transparently about it, and that you're honest about some of the things that are working, the progress that you're making, but also perhaps some of the drawbacks. When time comes to move from just doing the reporting to actually producing the content and preparing it for publication, make sure that you're quite clear on who's going to do what there again. Coordinate that phase of production. Who's going to be doing the writing of what part? Who's going to be doing the fact checking? Make sure that you're really quite clear on that. And then also, there might be some things that don't turn out as you had planned. So think about some risk management measures. If you think that there's the potential for something to not work out or to run aground because of some issues, what are the kind of alternative ways that you'll operate in order to still ensure that you're able to deliver on the work? So now a few tips for what to do in an application. And these are so pretty straightforward. And in essence, they come from just kind of understanding what the scope of this project is about. That's clearly defined in the grant details on the website, on the application portal. It's also something that you'll be guided to do through the application form. But we invite you to really think about these elements ahead of time. So this is pretty obvious, but emphasize the cross-border collaboration and subject of your project. Make sure, yet again, that your localized focus is really clear and specific in the work. Anything that is too broad and that doesn't include that local hook is something that might not be appreciated by the jury. And I'll talk more about the role of the jury in a moment. You want to start highlighting the promise of results for your investigation, or at least the strength of your hypothesis. If you don't know quite yet where your investigation is going to go, you have to explain and provide as best as you can information for why you think your hypothesis is solid, is anchored in reality. So you want to have documents and data that start really laying the groundwork for the investigative focus that's to come. So make sure that you also outline what you're going to investigate. And it has to have like an investigative nature, right? You have to unearth new information that isn't otherwise in the public domain. So you want to not just do interviews with individuals and do like perhaps a feature piece or a feature length piece, but you want to, again, focus on the investigative component of it. You want to make sure that you explain why this reporting is going to be new and distinct from previous reporting work. You want to be very concise and aligned with the assessment criteria that are laid out on the website and various documents to make sure that the information is clear. You want to be clear about what media outlets are going to be working on this project and who are the freelance journalists that are going to be participating. And that has to be laid out in the first part of the application. Present a realistic budget and time frame for publication. So those are what to do, what not to do, and to avoid. Avoid having a scope of investigation that is too broad. Don't try and put too much into your proposal. This is something that the jury members who are seasoned journalists will be able to pick up on, and they'll sense if you're going to get too scattered, and if, in fact, what you're saying you're going to do would require, several different investigations. So be sharp in what you propose. Make sure that you don't omit evidence to support the validity of your hypothesis. So you don't want to come into to this application having done no research. You want to have a bit of investigation work done in order to present like a strong case. Don't be vague about who are going to be the collaborators and the roles that you'll take on. Be as clear about that as you can in the proposal. The budget should avoid being unrealistic, overinflated. We ask you that you avoid putting down travel or requesting money for travel that is not related to reporting. We also mentioned the 80-20 split between journalists and media organizations that are based within Europe, the EU, and outside of the EU. So try and stick as best as you can to that proportionality when asking for funding. Okay, now I'm going to go into what we can offer you to as part of this program and to ensure that your application is as strong as it can be. So I'm available for pre-application meetings. I don't speak all the languages that you could want to have a conversation in, but I have colleagues who could do the work of engaging you and answering your questions. So you could request a pre-application meeting to discuss what your pitch is, what your story idea is, to discuss the eligibility elements, particularly when it comes to kind of the budget, how you'll distribute the work. And if you have a really great idea, you want to apply, but you haven't really found someone to collaborate with, this is also something that you can apply for. So you can book a meeting online. It's a 30-minute uh, just consultation effectively before you apply. In terms of the budget, we cover two costs. First is working time for freelancers in media outlets. And then also we cover expenses. And the expenses should directly relate to the investigation. So we'll support travel, provided it's travel to do reporting. Visa, accommodation, translation, access to databases, FOI requests, legal screening, insurance, photography, so long as the photography is related to the reporting work, is stuff that we can support. What is not covered by the grants are the following: overheads, office costs, investments, production costs. What we mean by that is the creation of graphics that you'll use for social media promotion, um, any other elements that are not related to the actual kind of reporting work, but more to the kind of post-production or kind of dissemination of the work is stuff that we will not support. Similarly, we don't cover costs for food and beverage while you're doing the reporting. And again, as I mentioned, minimize unnecessary travel. Okay, so we are prepared to offer mentoring. This is particularly available and recommended even for junior teams. Sometimes the jury will recommend that a project actually like gets the support of a mentors if they feel like it's a bit on shaky grounds, and could benefit from some guidance from a more experienced journalist that we have vetted as a qualified mentor. You can select who that mentor should be for your project by consulting the page for mentors on the journalismfund.eu website. So what they can help you with are tips for the research, for securing information and communication, identifying sources, methodology for interviews, sharpening the focus of your story and the angle, but also of the storytelling once you come to the writing. It brings a fresh perspective on your story and can just help you think a bit outside the box, provide you with some motivation once you're encountering some difficulties and running into stumbling blocks, and again, kind of broaden the network of journalists that you engage with. In terms of the jury, every grant program at the Journalism Fund is composed of an independent jury. So I, despite being like the project coordinator for this program, have no say on who actually gets the money. I just coordinate passing the information on to the jury, and then it's usually like a jury of four members that review the applications in depth and will submit independently their feedback on each application, and then they will come together at the jury meeting to make a final decision on whether to grant the money or not. So these juries, needless to say, are composed of really experienced individuals that have serious journalism and investigative journalism chops. We maintain their anonymity, so you will not know who is making a decision. They declare a conflict of interest as well, so there's no issues with that. There's no involvement of like any other third parties, but this jury in the decision making, and you have confidentiality also when it comes to your work. None of the information about your application will be shared publicly or with anyone outside of myself and the jury. So when you're granted money, if you're granted the money, the way that we proceed is through like a contract meeting, just to kind of review the terms and conditions for how to use a grant during the grant period. Typically, or all the time actually, like the way that we disperse the money is by doing a 2/3, 1/3 split. 2/3 come to you at the beginning of the money to just help you get launched with the work, and then we hold back a third until we're actually closing the project. So that's when there's publication of the work. You answer a survey and one other thing that I'll mention in a moment. But yeah, once you've got the money, we don't interfere with your work. So in terms of deliverables, the way that we track your work during the course of the project, every 2 months we ask you for an interim report, just less than a A4 page, 1 page of just updates on how you're progressing. It's not about the information that you're gathering, it's more about how the work is going, right? So there's no editorial information. Nothing about the kind of substance of your investigation needs to be revealed. It's more about how you're on a sort of project management standpoint, how you're moving forward. So there's no other sort of like milestones that are set. At the end of the project, again, as I mentioned, we want to see the publications. We want you to fill out a short survey and to account for how you've used the money so that we can just make sure that everything is according to the standards for financial accountability that are required in general across programs, but particularly because this is funded by the EU according to EU standards. We also are here to support you in your work and to make sure that the investigation gets the visibility that it deserves. So we can help you think through how to ensure you get the biggest reach. And that is both in terms of the kind of distribution, kind of perhaps social media strategy, but also in terms of perhaps connecting you with people who might be interested in publishing the work. And also we're here to support you in kind of preparing the investigation to have as much impact as can be. So we're developing resources for that. At the end of the project, we also have some scholarships available, and that is designed to support you or your colleagues, people that you've collaborated with, to actually enhance the visibility of your work, to share your experience. So we invite you to go to conferences, trainings, like do webinars, attend other journalistic events. So there's up to €1,000 available per project on a one-time basis to cover registration fees and hotel and travel expenses. So that's available at the end of the project. So how to apply, very briefly, this is a screenshot of the grant portal. You can select which grants you want to apply for. In this case, you'd want to apply for the European Local Cross-Border Grant Program. There are some details you can see up top here in the menu about the program. There's an FAQ that gives you a sense of like the details and grant details as well, provides you some more information about everything that you need to know to apply. This is what the first page or the first a step in the application process will look like. We'll ask you whether you're applying primarily as an individual, as a freelancer, as a journalist, or as a news outlet. And then on the right-hand side, you can see how the application form kind of breaks down. So there are several questions per section, but we'll ask you about the project. What is the conflict that you're seeking to uncover in your investigation? How strong is your hypothesis? How much work have you done on this? What has already been reported about this work, and how will your work be distinct? How will your story find an audience? How are you planning on making sure that it gets published? By who? And on what timeline? And we'll ask you for a budget. There's a template that is set out there. Feel free to ask us questions about how to fill that out, but it's pretty self-explanatory otherwise, and then you can just submit the piece. So this is an example of what the actual form looks like. We invite you, once again, to be concise and direct and sharp in the information. Don't write too much, just be really to the point. That will save you some time, but also ensure that the jury just really gets the point of your work and is really clear on what you're presenting. Okay, briefly, these are some key links that you should keep in mind. The general website, the application portal. This is my email in case you want to follow up with me. There's a phone number here to the office that you can call as well. And if you want to subscribe to follow us, there's a newsletter and also all of the different social media platforms that we're on. Okay, so we're at 12 minutes to the hour. So I'm going to stop sharing and invite anyone to come off mute if you have a question.